exactly gave Toman his power? What were his responsibilities when he finally reached the position of Deputy Minister of the Interior and Head of Foreign Intelligence? It's going to bring us to Taggart eventually, and Tao.
Could you repeat this? We had an event here, things falling, so...
I just dropped something.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. We have a lot of events today. It's Tuesday and the midterms.
Indeed,
what
yes.
exactly gave Toman his power, and what were his responsibilities when he was at the apogee of his career?
Well, being an employee of the Interior Ministry alone made him a powerful man. Being...
Excuse me, you have to, in a general context, for people who don't understand Eastern European politics, how important was the Interior Ministry in a government in Eastern Europe?
In post-war Czechoslovakia, the Interior Ministry was clearly the most powerful ministry in the whole political system. It really dominated everything. And so the communists were determined from the beginning to have their man to run the institution. They chose a man called Nosek, who was a pre-World War II communist, but he was one of those communists who spent the war in London rather than in Moscow, which in a way was a concession on the part of the Communist Party. The communists could have dictated that, let's say, Rudolf Slansky become Minister of Interior, but they didn't, because they understood that it would make no sense for them to ask too much too soon. So Nosek became the Minister of Interior, and he ran an institution that was very powerful. At the end of the war, there were very few people who felt that their records were completely clean. Either you were a victim of the Nazis, or you had worked in some way, in some either immoral or even outright murderous manner with the Nazis, or you were sort of hanging on to some appearance of morality in some gray zone between being a martyr and a victim on the one extreme and being a collaborator on the other extreme. So the Interior Ministry was a very powerful institution because it could decide who was going to be charged with acts against national honor, or collaboration, if you will, and who was going to be hailed a hero of anti-Nazi resistance. And so it was a very powerful institution, and Toman was one of the employees of this very powerful institution. If you could flash your ID and say Ministry of Interior, people's smile just froze on their lips, and they paid very close attention to what you wanted them to do. Once Toman became, in fact, Chief of Foreign Intelligence, then his power increased exponentially. And you have to realize that unlike in other countries, whether it's United States or Israel, where there are different intelligence services that compete for turf and for authority, in Prague, if you were, because of the sort of new post-war era where everything was new and the boundaries were yet to be formed, if you were an aggressive person, and Toman certainly was, then you could create your own powers. You could simply, by acting in a certain manner, you could usurp the authority that may have been initially set aside for somebody else. And in fact, I know that Toman subsequently said in an interview that he combined the powers of what in America would be the chief of the CIA, the old DCI, Director of Central Intelligence, plus the Director of the FBI, and plus several other of the many intelligence services that the United States has. Whether this was all entirely true, I don't know, but that's really what Toman believed.
Was he in charge of the borders? Was his office in charge of the borders?
Oh no, he would not be in charge of the borders. In those days, the so-called Pohraniční stráž hadn't existed, the border force that guarded the border. It hadn't existed yet. The borders were not really guarded by anybody other than a kind of a tax police that guarded against smuggling. There was a lot of smuggling going on between Germany and Czechoslovakia because there were near famine conditions in Germany, near famine conditions in Austria, and anybody who had a carton of American cigarettes could go to Germany and get a Mercedes. Or it was the discrepancy between those two economies was fantastic, and so smuggling was very common. And so if anybody guarded the border, it would be this kind of tax police that was supposed to protect against smuggling.
Kostoman claimed that he was in charge of the borders, that his office was in charge of the border police.
Well, it could well be, but the Pohraniční stráž, or PS, the famous sort of troops that had green hat tops, they came into existence only in 48, 49, maybe even 50. I don't know. Until then, it would have been a police and tax police matter.
Well, I've heard from people that they were afraid of Toman because he was a big minister in the communist government, and people were afraid of him. Yeah, do you know anything about that?
Well, I think in the post-war environment, people were really afraid of anyone who could have had access to information. Information was extremely valuable. It always is. But again, in countries that had spent years under Nazi occupation, information was everything. As I said, somebody could call you a collaborator and you would be hanged 24 hours later. Somebody could call you a hero of the resistance and you would receive the nation's highest awards. And maybe it was exactly the other way around. So that's what made these people extremely powerful. And that's why people trembled in their boots when they came and said, I am Toman from the Ministry of Interior.
Was he responsible for ordering people to be arrested and tortured and brought into the Lubyanka of Prague?
I am not aware of it, and if he was, then I would really be surprised. His job was not that at all. The Communist Party had other organs that took care of it, most notably the notorious STB, the state police. The abbreviation was STB. They were the ones who wore long leather coats, in many cases probably left behind by the Gestapo, and they were the...
I have to interrupt you. You said that I would be surprised to find out that he was doing... You have to tell me who he was. I apologize.
I would be surprised if Zdeněk Toman were responsible or had been responsible in 1945, 46, 47 for sending people to concentration camps or to prison, Lubyanka of sorts. That simply wasn't his line of work. That would have been the STB who would be in charge of doing something like that. And then the Communist Party, in fact, had other secret organizations that even the Ministry of Interior sometimes didn't know about because they worked directly for the Central Committee of the Communist Party. ZOB was one, ZOB Roman numeral 2. These were secret police organizations that worked under the hierarchy of the Central Committee